Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I think you went shopping before.
I swagged up.
Well, welcome.
Thanks. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
I was only curious if you would have been kind of sprouting a toupee since I saw you last. You know, some people when they go into startup land, they trade in everything they believe in, and most people start doing everything they believe in.
I had it for a while, and it just wasn't a good look for me. So
I did hear somebody from Saturday Night Live said they saw Mick Jagger's wig fall off, and
Really?
Who would have thought that Mick Jagger has a wig? It's, you know, it hasn't been in People Magazine or Us Weekly yet, so it might not be true.
well, I think you just got to own it. If you're going for it, you got to own it. So I'm not blessed with beautiful hair like you.
This is
so.
a wig.
This is a wig. I didn't want to say it, but well, Bing, we'd like to start these out by just getting to know you a little bit. Tell us about where you grew up. Tell us about your family a little bit, and take us back.
Okay, so first, having lectured a lot also in school, my rule is when you're in a lecture, you need to take away 1.5 ideas. So I hope all of you will be active, and my sense is that very few humans can take away more than 1.5 ideas from a single session unless they take notes. So everybody, you know, my job is to keep you awake, and your job is to harvest 1.5 ideas. So I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. My father was first-generation Scotsman. His dad was a janitor. He was somebody who believed the grass is always greener and didn't have kind of context or resources. Thanks, Dad. We were the first to move into a subdivision built out of a farmlands surrounding Detroit. So I grew up kind of in the creek and playing sports with my brother, who remembers growing up in the House of Pain. So I had a good Midwestern upbringing. I didn't work in an office before going to Stanford Business School, but I did think I was a pretty damn good teenage caddy.
Yeah, were you? Good golfer or just caddy?
No, I'm not a good golfer. I got to be a pretty good video game golfer, which I think is far superior to real golf. What all of us know in the digital age is you want to control time. Kind of the first thing you have to put in any video game. You want more sound back there? Or, more loudness? I can only do one thing unless the engineer does something, and that's to put this in my throat. It's right here in tracheotomy land.
Switch the far side. I'm gonna get.
That worked.
Let's not do that.
Maybe I'll turn around backwards.
Yeah, we'll get real close. Real close to you. Let's try that.
How's that? Who liked that commercial in the Super Bowl in the library? As usual, you know, I did wonder, wouldn't it be great if you had TiVos where you could push a button and only see the commercials? No, I was time management. You know, being able to manage your own click pressure. For any of you who are designing, I assert that humans all have their own click pressure, and if you want to see what their sought-after metabolism is and how fast they move through stuff, give them a remote control clicker. And it's the third thing you want in a compatible couple. You know, the first is sex, the second is it's either smell or combined interest, and the third is click speed on the remote control. If you both have the same click speed, you're in trouble.
Where did this interview go right now?
Time management. Video game golf.
2 more days of I love it. Tell me, you didn't play golf, but you did play sports, right? You played hockey?
I played hockey and lacrosse up to university level, and then played both kind of for most of my adult life. My self-image coming out of Michigan was a jock, and I went to Yale, and I realized 20 years later, I hated it, but I realized 20 years later that going to a place with a diversity of achieving people is kind of a gift.
Huh. Why did you hate it? You hated Yale? I mean, you've done a lot for Yale, so.
People were so unhappy at Yale in the 70s. You know, I wanted to be a Californian, and you know, around here, if you live in Palo Alto or even you come in here, you make eye contact, you smile politely, even if you don't like them that much. Not all the way to Hollywood smile, but you make eye contact and you're open to people because it's sunny and we're all beautiful and we're all smart and we like each other and we're in a win-win economy. And in New England, people wear beards, they look at the ground, they define themselves on who their parents are. The weather sucks. It's a great place to play hockey. Because, you know, on Long Island Sound, the only beautiful place in winter is inside the hockey arena because the ice glistens and the boards are white. But, you know, I see it now. Even people go to Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School. People make careers in New England with zero-sum games.
Uh-huh.
You know, you see somebody and you're always competing with them. Life is graded on a curve. And the nice thing about Moore's Law is life's not graded on a curve. It might be a winner-take-all if you can get a network effect. But this 10x improvement every 6 years means you can succeed wildly without having to kill someone. And it's a good reason to live in Northern California if you're a nice person. Now, if you really like zero-sum games, you can live in New York or play Madden football. It turns out we found in games that 3 times many people will be motivated by cooperative game settings than competitive. So if you're making products for people and you want to attract people who aren't 15 to 25-year-old boys or those who think like them, build in cooperation. Gifting trumps getting on the web.
When did you figure that out? I mean, at what point did cooperative gaming really start?
You know, Electronic Arts did a game called Command and Conquer, and we started going online. And as chief creative officer, I was trying to help invent new features, and I had this instinct, and they didn't believe me because the video game business was created by 15 to 25-year-old boys, and so finally, I shamed them into doing it, and it became the co-op skirmish was most popular in a game called Lotso that I designed on Pogo. Put in the first co-op mode. It was a team card and team Lotso, and also charity card. You get something, and you get something for you, and it gives somebody half of the reward to whoever's the last place. So the first co-op ever in a casual
It's
game.
one of middle-aged women's favorite games of all time, isn't it?
I have great design sense for 42-year-old women.
You do. I've heard that. A lot of people have told me about that.
Well, okay, now if you do the New York Times crossword puzzle and you play casual games, you know, you got the soul of a 42-year-old woman.
Sure.
I don't watch Home Makeover.
You don't?
I don't.
But you watch Housewives.
No, I don't. No, I think TV has only a single time control, and that bores me.
Tell me, what did you study at Yale? What were you planning to do? What was the path?
I went to Yale thinking I was going to be a math major and a writer, and I got there and Yale was lousy in math, and it seemed socially irrelevant. So I kind of became an athlete, near college dropout. I realized I was flunking a third of my classes going into the final. The video game business was invented by high potential kids who were bored with lectures. So all of you who are comfortable in this room, you would not be good video game designers. If you'd be out there in your hands figuring out, you know, fantasizing, making us twitch up here, that's a good instinct for video game
hands out there.
And I proudly, and my proud accomplishments in college, other than sports achievements, was I wrote poetry, kind of light verse, and did poetry readings in a coffee shop. And Peter Falk, when he was doing Colombo came and liked it so much he took me out drinking that night. And that was kind of fun. And my other one is I hitchhiked to 49 states in the U.S. while a college student. Wasn't able to hitchhike to Hawaii. I didn't have the chutzpah to hitchhike.
In the middle of school?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just did the online stuff or what?
Summer as well.
Okay. Coming out of college, what was your first job? What did you do coming out of Yale?
I was an actor in New York City.
Really?
And at the same time, I was a busboy at Max's Kansas City, kind of the first glitter bar in New York, where like Iggy Pop played and the New York Dolls. And I did that for a year, and I realized that professional theater kind of sucks because you don't get to work when you want, and you make your name in bad plays. You know, in amateur, you get to do all the classics, or you get to reinvent some of the classics, and professionally you're stuck. So I got my Actors Equity card in a thing called Siamese Connections by David Rabe, who had just gotten a Tony for his previous one, and this was sequel. And we know in video games what sequelitis is like. So you know you have to make your career in a sequel.
What brought you?
So after that, I kind of always wanted to be a writer. I still think that book writing is kind of the most honorable avocation. I think it's a pretty shitty business, but and even though fewer people want to read all the time, I still think that is kind of the product that carries the most honor in my mind. And so I started doing various odd jobs, trying to make enough money so I could afford to write. And a couple years later, after commercial fishing and tree planting, I got enough money. I had a 56 pink Pontiac Chieftain and an electric typewriter, and I sat down to write, and I realized I hate writing. And I only did it because, teachers needed it for school. It's better than doing other stuff in school, but any of you who are writers, it's like, ripping your heart out one word at a time. And it's nice to be in business as a writer because all managers want to read is the first line. And, summarize, the elevator pitch. And by the way, at, Stanford Business School, that's the grad school you go to if you got 100-point lower SAT scores than all your friends. They're very anti-intellectual.
Wait, what? Stanford GSB is where you go if you get 100 points less than everyone else?
Yeah.
Who are your friends?
Most of my friends didn't go to Stanford Business School, but no, it's in business you need charisma and animal energy. It's way more important than intellectual savvy and great memory. We see a few people. You see kind of, we're blessed around here. The people in business here are rocket scientists. I go to Amazon board meeting. It's the only retailer in the history probably of this earth and others where there are rocket scientists actually making decisions. And,
what is animal energy? What do you, when you say that, what do you mean by that?
It's usually the ability to, the David Geller guy who can bend a fork from a distance through psi energy. Animal energy is the ability to bend the will of other people while standing up. I think Steve Ballmer's got it. And, a lot of leadership is, it's kind of like a tuning fork, getting everybody on the same wavelength. And then the other thing is, after you've been doing business for 40 or 50 years, I see some age-oriented peers, and the ability to take meetings at 10 at night or 6 in the morning after you're 35 years old is useful. The ability when you're 35, if you've got kids, to be able to put the kids to bed and then go out and do sports or get up at 5:30 in the morning and work out turns out to be a real advantage in business. It might not be as much an advantage as a university professor. So having energy reserves is a great life gift.
Literally having physical energy reserves.
Physical energy reserves.
It's interesting.
And, it's not just the psycho 20-somethings who have to go around the clock. There's just, working smart only gets you so far. I had a friend who is, I talk a lot to people who are starting their careers. I had a friend who talked about starting his career as a movie producer, and he said he only has one piece of advice, and that's work as hard as you can, and then work harder. So there's just no substitute for the ability to work hard and be in a good mood. So when I see somebody in a workplace who can't help but smile and compliment people, I just tell them, don't ever lose that. Startups and the creative process is so hard. You don't want nervous Nellies or kind of snarky Sams. So somebody who is that uplifting, that's worth 20 IQ points. And if you got the 20 IQ points, you owe it to yourself to be really happy, because then you get 20 more.
It's an interesting thought. As we were walking in, Jim Franklin from the CEO of Sengrid's here. I'm going to call you out, Jim, but he was telling me about, Jim's a marathon runner, and he's an Ironman. He does Ironmans. Do you know?
He's got
Jim?
Energy, but he sounds like an addict too.
Well, but he was telling me his schedule. He said, "Well, I'm flying to India next week. I'm doing this and that." And I just said, "How do you do it?" And he clearly has it. He has the animal energy.
Yeah.
He's in shape. He's taking care of himself, and he's up in the morning and done at night. So,
yeah, it's
who do you see that has that? I mean, who today? I mean, Ballmer, but who else do you see?
I work with John Doerr. I work with Ted Schlein, who kind of he ran up and down the Grand Canyon. Sounds kind of crazy. I work with Mark Pincus, who surfs every weekend. I think most people that I work with around here who are leaders have extraordinary energy. Just growing up, where I grew up, my father was the only person in our neighborhood who didn't work in the car business, and the U.S. automobile business, I would not typify their executives at having this high-powered physical energy. And, it's just valuable, so if you have it, cherish it. One of the things I've discovered about people as they get more experienced in life, they're unashamedly willing to talk about themselves as assets. And, if you're a number one draft choice or a thoroughbred, you gotta have good oats and get run. And you do yourself a disservice if you don't, treat yourself as an asset, kind of better than you treat your car.
Yeah. Talk to me about how you first.
Are we to the second question yet?
Yeah. Talk to me about how you got into EA. How did you meet Trip Hawkins? How did you get involved with EA in 1982?
I've written the first page of my book. And it starts like this. It's called Confessions of a Video Game Man, in homage to David Ogilvy, the advertising dude, who's my business hero. And so I'm on a commercial fishing boat. This was a summer that we landed 250,000 pounds of miniature shrimp over a summer and paid for my Stanford Business School. And I and another guy whose name I no longer remember, we were blown in. We were deckhands on a 72-foot boat, the Pegasus, blown into a harbor on the west side of Vancouver Island with no roads coming to it, with a salmon fishery only reached by seaplane. And our job was to stand out in the gale and in our foul weather gear and repair the net.
Can I ask, is this your book, or is this a real experience you had?
Well, this is the real experience. And
sorry.
So this is the
first page.
This is the first page.
Okay, sorry.
And
sounds like a fascinating book.
It's an awesome first page. I wish I could figure out how to operationalize a book the way I can operationalize game development. I could. I just don't like it as much. But maybe I couldn't. But anyway, so we're out there in the net, and now it's like 5, and the nights are long up there, and we still have time, but we can get out of the rain. And we go in, and I pick out a book to read, and he picks out his Heathkit catalog. And on the cover of it was Heathkit's first Build Your Own Computer. And he said, I'm going to build one of those. And I looked at that and thought, I bet with that you could do that movie with Yul Brynner with audio animatronics, Westworld. I bet you could do that. I bet this would be a way to have the experience of being an actor without having to put up with those other assholes. And but I didn't know. But kind of actors are very egomaniacally and extroverted, and they really like being on stage with Derek. And so I looked and didn't think anything of it at the time. And then I'm at Stanford Business School, and I went there because I was good with math, and otherwise I was going to be dead-ended. And Peter Keene, a decision science professor, asked, okay, you Stanford MBAs, let's have a real decision. If money were no object, what would you do? And I said, that movie Westworld, I would like to create inside computers an adult Disneyland where you play out real stories. And the room went silent, and the MBAs kind of were embarrassed. And the prof came up to me later and said, there's somebody with an answer that sounded like that in one of my other classes. You should see him. And that was Trip Hawkins. And I said, I played on the university champion touch football team with him, but I've never talked with him because he placed out of all the classes I'm in. He was not the 100 SAT point deficient MBA. And so we went and talked. And then we...
At Stanford?
At Stanford. We did a project together for Fairchild, who had the first, this is a trivia, the first cartridge video game system was made by Fairchild, called the Fairchild Channel F. They brought in some people from Kodak to run it. And between Atari and the Atari VCS and before the Magnavox Odyssey.
Fairchild, and it was a Fairchild Kodak.
Fairchild Semiconductor. They recruited consumer people from Kodak. What are the chances?
Sounds like a really fun...
The most political semiconductor company in the history of the world, with the camera company about to go out of business. And so we talked them into letting us. They gave us, we said, do you have any customer information? They gave us, some of you will remember the days when customers actually sent in postcards. And we said, well, do you have any customers? They said, oh yeah, we have a bunch of customer information. We said, oh, that's awesome. And they said, here, and they handed us a couple of shoe boxes. And so we wrote questions. We basically asked, how do you like the games? What do you wish there was? What do you wish was different? And we went back in, and the day we went back in to present our award-winning market research class findings, Wolf Corrigan, who ran Fairchild, had just come in and laid off every other person in this office. So they weren't highly receptive. That's how I met Trip. And we lived together, played a lot of games together on our free Channel F. And I made so much money fishing that I bought a hot tub. So we had a hot tub and a Channel F. Let me tell you, we were Party Central for Stanford Business School.
I mean, what did your friends and family think when they heard you were starting a video game company? I mean, was it?
Well, it wasn't any worse than what I was already doing. I left Stanford Business School. I worked half-time at Intel while I was in business school. And the other half of my time I drove to Marin to date the woman who's been my wife ever since. And my avowed goal was in 5 years to start a consumer tech ad agency to replace Regis McKenna. Regis McKenna was kind of the Chiat Day of the time in the Valley, working with Intel and Apple. And I thought he was a great PR guy. But I thought, okay, get a couple years of experience and eat their lunch because they do everything wrong. And then Tripp said, I'm going to start a software company in 5 years. Well, I actually did start an ad agency 6 years later. It's called Goodby Silverstein. It's in San Francisco. And I pulled them out of their work and joined them for one day, and then realized that grown-up business people in advertising give up their self-respect about age 40, and I intended to live past then. So I stayed with the games. But the game business in the 80s was pretty low creative. I realized early on I liked being with world-class creative people, and they were not in the video game business in the 80s.
So your first role there, were you doing marketing stuff?
I was the marketing dude. I worked with Goodby Silverstein to get ads. We created packaging. I did retail marketing.
The company's how big at this point?
This was in Sequoia Capital's EIR
Their
office.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think they gave us free some white paper, that you put up on the walls. Probably the only thing Don Valentine has ever given away in his life. And we started the business plan there. And Don Valentine, he's the founder of Sequoia, whose interpersonal behavior was once described as bazooka to the chest. If you ever want, and you should want, the voice of the market from an advisor, he was a great one. You just don't want it couched in cruelty. But Valentine went to Trip Hawkins and said, there's 136 computer game companies in the U.S. already. You say you want to start one, better get on your horse. And you like that from old duffers, a little sense of timing and context.
At what point did you realize? At some point you move out of. What happened after you move out of Sequoia's office? When was that?
We went over. You do what everybody does. You get a crummy office for no money with good parking, and our office was over on that little strip of land across from Key June's on the south of the airport. And it was kind of one little room. And the first Christmas, my wife brought a Christmas party cake, and it was in the shape of an Apple III. Because cake makers couldn't tell there was a Mac and an Apple III. And then we rented a second room, and we ran Apple Talk cables down the hall. And everybody, kind of the rooms were, 800 feet or something. There was not this proliferation of entrepreneur-friendly real estate devices back then, and there were a lot of tilt-up warehouses down in Santa Clara.
At what point did you guys realize, hey, we're into something good? Was there a point where you? What year was it?
I think blind faith is always useful, and what I'd say is none of us knew anything. We had a couple proof points that this would work, and so we all did what we knew best. So I knew management by objectives, and I knew branding. So that's what I did, and. My advice is when you start out, you need a combination of kind of blind faith, and you also want to recruit a couple people who already know their jobs so well that they can reach out and help around them a little bit. I like to say, perfect the perfectible. So, hire a great exec assistant, hire somebody great with numbers, somebody great with facilities. But in our original business plan, we talked about someday there's going to be million-unit sellers for the computer, and the first time we had one, success always feels different than you think it is when you're analyzing it.
Sure.
It's kind of like for anybody who's had a child, when you hold your first child, it's very different than anybody was able to describe. So we did a million-unit seller. The first time I realized it was different, I was getting in a cab in New York, and this is a little later, but in a cab in New York with an EA Sports logo. The guy turns to me and goes, EA Sport, it's in the game. And, here I am kind of sheepishly, counting the quarters to make sure I got enough to tip the dude, and don't know if 15% is enough in New York. And he turns to me and loves the logo, and, kind of gives me an emotional bear hug. So that was when a million seemed like ubiquity. Even 5 years ago when I started a venture capitalists, if you had 500,000 people coming to a website, that seemed like a tipping point. And the bad news is the new tipping point's 10 million. And that back then, 1 million was an unheard of number. There was so much friction in distribution.
So I worked at EA for 4 years. I started my very long career at EA as an intern out of college. And one of the things that always was so interesting to me about EA was that when you guys started with this mantra of, can a computer make you cry, right? And there's this kind of epic poster.
That was created by Goodby Silverstein.
Okay, I didn't know that, huh? So, but this is like in the early 80s, and you're saying, you think of what games or what even computers were at the time, and to have this huge vision of, someday you'll be playing a game and it'll interact with you so emotionally that it could potentially make you cry. That was the goal that was the vision. I mean, how did you have such big vision to kind of see that? Because, I mean, it's kind of inconceivable. It's kind of 30 years before its time.
Let's see. How did any of it? So I talked to you about the kind of the blind confidence. We believed in interactivity, and we believed in learning by doing, as opposed to learning by listening and sitting there. And we thought there would be this crossover from the magic of movies to games, and the games had interactivity. We didn't know exactly how. We thought it was going to be based more on visual fidelity and audio fidelity and maybe stories. But where that started from is if games were going to be a new art form, we aspired to art. And if games was to be a new art form, one measure of art is that kind of emotional connectedness. So we didn't actually start out saying, we see a game, we see people sitting weeping. That turned out to be the death of Floyd the Robot in Infocom's Planetfall. But we started out saying we aspire to art. And one of the things that David Ogilvy taught in advertising is if you want to connote quality, you focus on details. So does Persig in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That people judge quality by focus on details and expression of intent. And so we didn't want to say games will be art. Because if you say that's like Ford saying quality's job one, as soon as they say it, it's not. And so the way to connote quality is focus on the detail, use half tones and complex colors, and don't do what packages marketers would say, make the logo big and bash them over the head with media. And one of the things about working with great creative people is when you define a strategy, they can always come back with something that's on strategy but better than you imagine. And that headline was written by Jeff Goodby. Unimaginable to me. When we were on art and mission, and that someday games will stand beside movies, books, and recorded music, both in size and impact. But it's the no matter how much if you talk to Page and Brin, or you talk to Zuckerberg, or you talk to Bezos, when they have big success, it's always richer and different than they think. What you can do is start with a big vision that electrifies people, let other people around you help invent it, and then check in. So if you've got a vision, you have to check in. Are you delivering it in new ways? Are you still focused on it? Are you still taking risks to try to get there?
Could you tell the story about, you mentioned EA Sports, the brand, and you played a big role in that. Talk about the EASN. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was, well, let's see. So in Electronic Arts' original business plan, I do think my own experience is business plans matter, especially if you can take them and put them on the wall, give them ongoing value. Well, in our original business plan, we talked about the importance of branding. And if anybody who's lived with it, most people haven't lived on the inside of a brand. When you live on the inside of a brand, you understand it has this this magic that's kind of hard to describe, and but it changes people's behavior, almost like a really good bow tie. And so we said
Wait,
we were going
what?
to try to have brands. Well, we kept trying. So we tried a brand called Amazing Software. We tried a brand when we shipped the game called Bardsdale. I'm a big fan of, for quality brands, you want people to discover. You don't want, it wants to be a pull rather than a push. And we tried a little brand in the corner called Tales of the Unknown to see if anybody picked up on it, and nobody did. Then we did a thing called Sports Legends because we always knew we wanted to do sports. And Sports Legends sound cool to us, and we were trying to let grown-ups know that games could be for people who already had their driver's license. And so we wanted it to sound more distinguished, and so we kept picking these long names. So my learning about names, Electronic Arts is too long a name, Sports Legends is too long a name. If you have more than 2 syllables in one word, the longer it gets, the more you're saying we're an art film or we're a Mensa test. And as you can tell, most humans don't go to art films and don't like Mensa tests. So short names that don't have bad connotations that you can say with confidence and spell in multiple languages is a good thing. So Sports Legends, we realized after we did Earl Weaver, and then we did Ferrari, and we did John Madden, and then we realized, our sports legends were all people that weren't relevant. And when we went to put Madden football on Sega Genesis, we talked to teenagers for the first time, and I was the marketing dude, but also I was the product dude at the time, and asked them, in questionnaires and focus groups, which are now archaic, and you should probably never use them. Use Mechanical Turk instead, or flow tests on a website. We said, okay, 3 football games, which do you prefer? Electronic Arts football, touchdown football, John Madden football. And Electronic Arts football, average, touchdown football 30% higher, Madden football 30% lower. And the language under it said comments, and the comments were, you mean that old guy in the Ace Hardware commercials? He had hadn't been coaching anymore. And I said, we're going to go with John Madden football, because we had done Dr. J. Larry Bird 101. Julius Erving never did any commercial endorsements, but he did this game with us. He came and shot hoops with us at the Y in Burlingame. And we sat with them, and the developers did like 7 iterations of the whole graphic system to live up to Julius Erving. And I thought that our dev team would have the same fire in its eyes with Madden. So we went with Madden. So Madden tested bad, and a couple of humans decided that maybe John should make $50 million. But it gave a backbone. You're always trying to figure out with creative people, how do you keep their confidence and keep them on point? And we had people who believed in Madden, and he had a tuning fork. But he also, most people don't know, besides his books, he created a junior college curriculum. He had a guy who was a ratings expert, and he had 2 sons who went on to be coaches. Madden hated everything electronic. But he had a body of work that we had found with Earl Weaver was really useful. If you want to extract AI from real people, it's nice if they've already tried to create a work for you to start from. So now we're doing this, and there's a guy named Michael Kasaka who was a graphic artist, and his job is to make what's called a splash screen. Think of the title screen. Now we'd call it a loading screen, a page load, a landing screen if you're in e-commerce. His job was to make one for a basketball game. And he was trying all kinds of stuff, so he decided, and I believe in design you should do a squint test. You go like this, and if you want it to look different, it has to look different when you squint. If you squint and it looks like Google Maps, customers are going to think you're doing a map mashup. They aren't going to think you're doing a communication platform with Path. So always use a squint test. But so he decided to do something different, and he did a diagonal thing, and he had to fill it up, and he put in EASN. It was the font from ESPN, and but we'd always been talking kind of around the office about brands, and we were sports fans, and we'd had a launch commercial called "If It's in the Game, It's in the Game." And he did this, and Rod Swanson, who's here, knows a lot about this because he took it to the next level. But we went around and said, "This is awesome. Let's do this with all of our sports games." And for any of you who try to get employees here in the Silicon Valley, you know there's more jobs than people in the Silicon Valley, so they don't have to do what you say. And that's both a blessing and a curse, just as in marriage. It helps you grow. And people went around and said, "No, we don't want to do this. And, we want to do our own stupid splash screen." And so there was a guy named Don Transith who was the marketing manager, and Transith said, "This is perfect. We have to do this." And nobody would do it. And so, everyone else was giving up. Boy, that was going to be a cool idea. And so he went out to the equivalent of the day of Zazzle. I'm on the board of Zazzle, but I believe in the customized life. Even back then, he went out and he came back a week later with a stack of T-shirts that said EASN and some beanies that said EASN, and he called meetings. And he called meetings with all the product line leaders of the sports games with a kind of a presentation about why you should believe in EASN. And he had the swag sitting on the table.
It looked just like ESPN.
Looked like well, by now it did not look like ESPN because you can copy when you're creating, but then you have to be more original. And so one at a time, these guys came in and they looked straight at the swag and paid no attention to this, and they said, "Okay, so basically EASN got created because Don Transith spent $100 on T-shirts." And then, 4 years later, Rod Swanson was the person who said, "Make everybody's interface the same." And he went around to everyone and they said, "You got to be crazy. Our interface is better than theirs." And so he didn't do it with T-shirts. He did it with charm. Charm is cheaper than T-shirts, but T-shirts are pretty damn cheap. And then, so now we're out there and we launch in the launch of the Sega Genesis, the EASN line, the first interactive sports network, and everybody liked it except ESPN. And ESPN said, "We're going to enter the games business." And also Fox Sports at the same time, they said, "You guys better get out of the way. If you don't give us half ownership of EA Sports, we're going to take your business." When Electronic Arts, another thing that we launched with in the initial business plan, we said, in 10 years, 6 of the top 7 interactive entertainment companies are going to be based on the integrated movie studios, but we're going to be the one independent. We overestimated Hollywood. And it took us a decade to realize that Hollywood doesn't own anything but suits. Really good suits. So if any of you have Hollywood friends who want to negotiate for part of your business, ESPN calls up and says, "You owe us." Yeah. And what they settled for is they gave us a few $1 million worth of free media time. And so now we're sitting there and go, "Well, now what do we call this thing?" It's hard to come up with new names. And, when in doubt, go something that's protectable. So I was a fan of the Microsoft branding strategy, which is Microsoft generic and green. And so we did, EA Sports. We didn't call it Electronic Arts Sports. We learned our lesson that we didn't want it to sound like a Mensa test.
I'm going to ask you one more question about EA, and then we'll move on to some other things. But my first quarter as an intern was in January 2005. So I came in, stock price all-time high, about $70. When I left, it was at about 20. I feel somewhat responsible for that. Should I feel that I was a cause? I mean, what happened to EA? And it's not like EA is gone or anything, but what happened to EA over time that did Trip Hawkins left in the early 90s. You left in 2008. Tell us what happened.
It's always a danger to go from missionary to mercenary. And, when I was on the board of a school in Hillsborough called Nueva School, and it was very missionary. Nobody wanted to go there unless they had to. And over time, it became a trophy school. And the people who showed up, who wanted their kids to go there because it was a trophy school, put a lot of pressure on the sense of mission. At the same time as the school underwent a succession. So, when you have to do a succession plan from founders to professionals, it's really hard. So EA did it pretty well. EA did it better than Apple. I think the other thing is, for all of you who get successful, success is the enemy of invention and risk-taking. And I remind people constantly that 35-year-olds are the enemy of organizational risk-taking. They're at the perfect point in life to not take risks. And they've finally arrived, and they got car payments and house payments and a significant other who expects to be taken to dinner. And it's really hard to get 35-year-olds to take risk that's appropriate for the enterprise. Really hard to take, to make decisions based on expected value rather than least common denominator. There's math about it that I can explain, but the bottom line is most humans value 1 unit of success equal as 1/3 the value of 1 unit of failure. So one of your job as a leader, I think the people who are most prone to feel that way are either grown-ups in their last year of life or 35-year-olds. So your job as a leader is to get people to work on expected value, not on minimum hurdle. So I think the organizations tend to get sclerotic, but at EA EA's original mission statement was make software that makes a home computer worth owning. And EA did not believe in Nintendo. I didn't believe in Nintendo. We didn't believe that technology could go backwards and be successful. And I think that even with good marketing, EA started making games for people like themselves and gave up on everybody. It's always, it's at some point you can't give up on everybody. And I also think anytime you have an organization where you don't have 20-somethings rocketing to company leadership by the time they're 29 or 30, I think you also run the risk of getting sclerotic. But in fact, what exactly happened with EA is when you showed up, EA had discovered, and Rod was part of this, EA had discovered a job category called visual effects supervisor. It's basically the digital graphics guys in the movie business and the advertising business, and they are unionized hourly workers. And EA discovered them and got kind of 2 or 3 years of outsized success, basically with hourly workers. And what we didn't realize is what we did is just double the cost of development and inject into the organization people with kind of an hourly worker mentality who didn't really like games. And it was just kind of a meal ticket. And so about kind of 06-ish, other companies started hiring the same type people. And so the market share gains went away. And at the same time that it's always a problem when you have leaders who get too rich. So when your leaders their passion starts being nonprofits instead of the company or corporate headquarters, either one. And they stop coming in on Saturdays, or if they never did. If you have a leadership team, most of whom don't know that your developers are working on Saturday, you're screwed. And, I don't know, it's like, Patton, you just got to be at the front lines. So when you get so rich, you don't want to be in the front lines. And you get brittle. And when you get an organization that can't take someone like you and make him a vice president or something by the time you're 29, or if not you, somebody who looks just like you but was a better performer. You're toast. Electronic arts.
No, it's great.
Electronic arts up till about I kept track. Electronic arts. No former employee of Electronic Arts did anything better outside of Electronic Arts in its first 8 or 9 years. And at the time, Electronic Arts, I did a thing for Stanford Business School, and I counted the top 3 objectives. So for those of you who said it, the top 3 objectives every year for Electronic Arts in the 10 years before it became Stanford Business School's Entrepreneur Company of the Year. And we never hit all 3, but we always hit at least one. So every year was 1 or 2. We hit about half our objectives. And once you get to a point where you get punished for not hitting all 3, that's another problem sign. But the number one is if the leadership is allergic to the trenches, you get brittle. There's sometimes companies can run with no leaders for a long time, but you get brittle.
Mark Pincus has called you one of the world's best CEO coaches, and you do this for Zynga, you do this for Amazon. You've got a room full of very early stage CEOs or founders. What do you tell these people?
Let's see. So I don't know. So first, most of business can get explained by high school. So if you were a fan of how things worked in high school, whether you were in the middle of how things worked or not, the same kind of nervousness and vying for attention and having trouble getting your needs met and being kind of overworked and over-socialed, it's still what's driving the people you're doing business with. So anytime you run into a complicated situation, just imagine it's glee, and it will all be explainable. The next thing is, I think the most important thing for people in their 20s, my experience is everyone in their 20s wastes a year, and you do it from bad choices, kind of working on local maxima. So everyone in their 20s should have a mentor who all they want from you is thanks and feedback for when it's working, and you have to believe they have your best interest at heart. It's hard to get that from an investor because it's hard to believe, it's hard to even test that an investor will actually put your needs ahead of theirs. And most won't. I mean, money is very corrupting. So get a mentor. The next thing is that I believe that there's a lot of pathways to success, and the people who succeed have a higher likelihood if you're doing something you're passionate about. I think almost all walks of life, opportunities are created, and the people who are doing something they like will just pay more attention. So if you could do something, this is kind of a negative for enterprise software, but if you're doing something that matches a hobby, you're going to have redoubled time and attention. So, make sure you check why you're actually doing stuff. Then I think I think I've posted some other lessons. I have one, here's one that I haven't written about that everybody should pay attention. I call it, profanity is okay here?
What's that?
I call it the wow fuck scale. And it's a 4-point scale. I discovered this in game designs. It also works for exec assistants. And I'm a big believer in feedback. It's one of the things that's good about games, because wouldn't we all have appreciated if our spouses or professors gave us instant feedback that was clear and actionable? But the wow, and here's what it's like. The wow is, and you can check all this with a camera. And a camera is a better way to check what people are thinking than asking them. People always lie about what they're thinking. But a wow is, whoa! Derek, did you see that? Did you see that griffin in World of Warcraft? And or did you see Sandy Fitzgerald at Electronics? Did you see my assistant just wrote a business plan for a $600,000 information center? Wow! And all great games have one of those in the first session, and all great employees have at least one of those a year. And you know, if you're building a company and teams, great teams set up a rhythm of surprise. So if you have the great teams, as they finish, should be getting a surprise a week. And if you have a 10-person team, you know your job is one every 10 weeks. So as a leader, you want to set up a surprise pace. Great teams finish fast. And they start fast, but they really finish fast. So that's the wow. Then there's the good, and that's kind of the lean forward. Any of you have ever presented to venture capitalists? You know, it's the lean forward. It's kind of go, oh, well, same thing with gamers. You're playing a game, and you go, I like that. And you lean in. We did a game called Pinball Construction Set where we actually showed virtual hands going through the screen to get the pinball. You know, and Activision, the brand name really was reach into the TV and do something. It's like, I like that. And that's a plus. In the first session of your website, you should get 3 of those. And then the shit is, it's lean back. You've seen this for investors when you're going, you know, I'm doing this, and it's a seed, and I've never done anything before, and I want a $30 million pre-money valuation. They kind of go, or you go, you know, I'm a professional chef, and I'm doing an enterprise software company, and they kind of go, Well, in a website, so the most important thing to notice in web design, when the consumer lands and they feel stupid, they do this. I don't understand what's going on here. You just, there should be a button here, and I clicked it, and nothing happened. And if their first experience, they get more than 1 oh shits to 3 goods, you've lost them. And I think you're risk. You can grind out all the oh shits. And then the oh fuck, it's like, fuck. You know, put your hand through a screen, or it's usually a disconnect. So what it means in the web is DC and uninstall. And with secretaries, one of those a decade is the max. And an OFUC is a fireable offense if you define it. You should be able to define in advance. So with mine, I tell them, travel problems for me is an oh shit. Any kind of hang-ups where my family is left at personal risk because of an error of commission, that's an oh fuck. So I can take care of myself, but we all know if we have loved ones, their pain we feel worse than our own, especially if you're German. And so since I've found again and again with high-achieving people, if you can give them the rubric in advance, they will outperform. They're more likely to outperform. I was surprised when I did classes at Stanford after the first class of doing something with David Kelly on video game design. And at the end of the class, you know, there's 12 people out of the 15 people standing in line waiting to talk. I'm going, hey, maybe this class thing will work out. And the first comes up and goes, oh, Mr. Gordon, that was so great. I'm so inspired. Now, what are you going to consider A, work in this class? And I kind of go, well, I don't know, probably pretty amazing stuff, and you know, you learned a lot, and they go, oh, okay, thanks. The next person goes up and goes, I really like that thing that you said about, you know, what you learned from Super Mario, and what would it take to get an A in your class? And I kind of go, boy, this is Stanford for you. You can't get into Stanford if you haven't kind of made it a religion to always get A's. And so I learned, create a rubric. And my rubric as a professional educator is you cannot get an A from the professor. For me, you can get a B plus. If you're such a weenie, you're dependent on me for your total feedback, B plus. I will bring outsiders in who will be objective and have no reason to be nice to you. And it's kind of the way the world works. So get an A from the real world. Or at Stanford, it's you got in, you get an A. That's an understandable rubric. So as managers, it's hard to set performance rubrics because, especially if you do it task-based performance rubrics usually don't hold up over time, especially if you're in a changing environment. So what I tell general managers is your job is to have done these things that I think is going to change the value of the whole organization in about this time frame. And employees, your job is to attain the skills and demonstrated capabilities in this time frame so you can get this promotion if the job still exists, but you're going to be about this much more valuable and you're on this kind of career path. I'm not a fan of management by doling out tasks for college grads.
I'm going to ask you one more question. If somebody wants to ask me a question, why don't you come right over here and I'll bring the mic over to you.
If you've got 1.5 things already, then congratulations. If you haven't, and I'd encourage you to. You can tell that I'll say anything. So if you've got something, how do you get funding? Why are there only 2 commas in Kleiner Perkins' name? Why is it so long?
Why are there only 2 commas in Kleiner Perkins' name?
It turned out the ampersand was just valued more highly back in the day.
Meredith, are you here? Where's Meredith?
But let's see.
Well,
I find that usually talking to people who are trying to start companies that I tend to focus on things to do at 50 employees rather than 5. But there's not a whole lot of wisdom in the 5 to 10. Let me try to list a few wisdoms for a group of 5 to 10 people. One is beat the calendar. Great enterprises get 2 weeks of work done every calendar week. And as a leader, the most important thing to do is prototype at low resolution fast and don't leave finished stuff on the cutting room floor. So save your people time. And then hire really great people and then have tools. So invest in tools up front so you can finish fast. And then there's a bunch of ways to get people started fast. And my discovery with most project teams is they start as slow as they can because they're afraid of wasting time and also they're tired. And I found as a college professor, all college kids can do things in a week. You give them 2 weeks, they only work on it a week. And boys, only 24 hours. But a week, then those same people who are best and the brightest go into a job and they do the same amount of work and it takes 2 weeks. It's kind of 1 week to do the work and 2 days up front to make sure you got it right, and then a few days to kind of get it approved before you embarrass yourself. You get to be vice president, it takes 3 months, and it's the same amount of work, but it's a lot more checking and making sure to avoid embarrassment. So keep people on the 1 week check-in, especially if you got an organization that wants to have the energy of young. 1 week check-ins with clear measurable goals. And the clear measurable goals can even be, okay, there's 10 of us. What do we think of this idea? Scale of 1 to 10. So that's 1 week. Oh, and I've got a rule about scale of 1 to 10. I go around to people and ask, your most productive day in life is a 10, your least productive is a 1. Where are you today? And I found that if people give a 6 or below, they are unhappy. And they're usually poorly managed. And a good number is 7 to 8. That's kind of marathon. My experience is people in their 20s, if they say it's a 9 or 10 day, they're usually pissing off people around them, writing bad code and breaking things. 7 or 8, you can go forever. So if you've got everybody in 7 to 8 an occasional sprint, it's kind of like if you're a cycling fan, you got to be able to cover attacks. So if you're kind of going at 7 to 8, you can cover attacks. So, do that. After you get to the wow fuck scale, go ask everybody how you doing. And if everybody's flat out at 10s, I'd declare a Sunday off because they're probably breaking things.
Let's give Bean Gordon a big round of applause. Thanks for coming, man.